Thank you for joining us on Sunrise Live. It is a few minutes after 7 o'clock right now. We are talking about the devolution process, which was set off by the general election that took place on March the 4th, 2013. And our question today to you is, what are your expectations of a devolved system of government? Gotten a tweet from Lecha saying, your question is hard, simplify it further. Here's what it is. What do you expect from your county governor? Are you even aware of what you should expect from your county governor? What services is he supposed to or she supposed to provide for you? What does the devolved system of government mean to you? Are you clear about it? Today we're going to try and answer all the questions you may have, and I can already see them coming in. Today we are making a point of understanding the process of devolution. For whatever other politics is going on in the country, the process of devolution is starting to roll out. Do you understand it? Do your elected officials understand their roles? There's a lot of anxiety and perhaps apprehension amongst some workers in various institutions of government. They're saying, will we be absorbed by the county? Will we stay on the national level? Are you one of those persons that does not understand this process? Today, Professor Wanyande, who's the commissioner at the CIC, will answer all the questions that we have today. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Let's start off by talking about the meeting that you had with elected and appointed officials for the better part of last week. Why were you meeting them? And of course, it was to perhaps take a look at the devolution process. Tell us about that meeting and its outcomes.
Thank you. We at CIC are mandated to monitor and oversee the implementation of the Constitution, and Section 15(2)(d) of the 6th schedule to the Constitution mandates CIC to monitor the effective implementation of the devolved system of government. Now, on the 4th of March, elections were held, and that really ushered in the devolved system of government in terms of creating or establishing the national government and the county government. So pursuant to the mandate of monitoring the effective implementation of the devolved system, we went out to the ground to establish for ourselves the state of preparedness by the county governments to actually carry out their functions as provided in the 4th schedule to the Constitution. So that was basically what we went to find out. How prepared are they? What is in place to enable the county governments start operating, and particularly to start performing functions that are assigned to them. That was the basic reason why we went out. Okay.
Going out and meeting them and speaking to them would perhaps inform your initiatives in the future. What did you find? Are they ready? Are the systems in place? And perhaps it's not even just about systems and infrastructure, but also the capacity, of the elected officials. Do you find that a lot more capacity building is required? Because this is a new system of government, and we saw the Transition Authority also doing some training for those who are candidates for the position of governor. Is this something that you're perhaps planning in the coming days and weeks?
Yes, the way to look at it is this, that the functions that have been assigned or allocated to the county governments, and which are very clearly spelled out in the 4th schedule, are actually functions that have been going on actually ever since independence. So they are not new functions. And to the extent that have been going on, it means that there are people who are actually performing those functions. So when we are talking about the human capacity, then really it exists, because those functions have been performed by concrete individuals who had the capacity, the expertise to perform them. When you're talking about resources, equipment and so on, again, they were performing them using the required equipment. Now when you talk about the resources in terms of money, the response is this, that there is money allocated to county governments out of the nationally raised revenue. Again, that is a constitutional provision, I think in chapter 12 of the Constitution. And it says very clearly that resources will follow function. So if you assign a function to any of the two levels of government, then the resources must be made available. And that has actually been done, so that the resources are available. And in our assessment, really, a lot has been done that can actually enable the county governments to take off and therefore to carry out those functions.
Okay. And it's interesting, of course, that you clarified that a lot of these were already going. We're just giving it a new face and perhaps streamlining that a little better. So some hope then, of course, that this is not something entirely new that we're all dealing with, that we've never had before. But let's talk about the rollout process now. We're expecting, the swearing in of the governors and the senators. Let's talk about the relationship between the governor and the senator, the roles of that, because believe it or not, we still have a lot of us that don't understand the governor's role, the senator's role. The senator sits in the county or he sits in Nairobi. The governor sits in his county or he sits in Nairobi. Kindly clarify.
First of all, the governor will sit in his county. And I'm saying his county because from the look of things, all the governors that were elected are men. So they'll all sit in their counties.
Right.
Because they are responsible for all the management of all the affairs of a county, and particularly those functions that have been assigned to the county government. The governor is an executive of the county, so he heads the executive arm of the county government. And at the county level, we have only got two arms of government: the executive, as I said, headed by a governor, and the legislative arm. And the legislative arm really consists of the elected county assembly representatives. Those are the people who are in the legislative arm, whose role is basically to legislate, make laws that are used within the county. But they also have an oversight role in terms of, for example, approving all major decisions, including appointments to positions in the county made by the governor or proposed by the governor. So they've got that legislative as well as the oversight role, which therefore helps in the terms of checks and balances to ensure that the governor or the executive does not overstep his powers or his boundaries. So that is an important role played by the people who have elected from the various wards that we now refer to as the county assembly representatives. But they will also discuss plans, development plans proposed by the governor and the executive. The senator is a lawmaker, and as a lawmaker, the senator is charged with the responsibility or mandated to ensure that the interests of the counties are actually protected, so that if the National Assembly passes a law that is to the disadvantage of a county or counties in general, then the senators have a responsibility to veto that particular legislation, because that would enable them then protect the interests of the counties. But the senator is also mandated within the constitution, by the constitution, to deal with issues of how money raised nationally will be distributed, and especially after the first 5 years. You see, right now the Commission on Revenue Allocation has within its mandate determined or provided a formula of how you share this nationally raised revenue between the national government and the county government, as well as between the county government. So, but the Senate will from time to time review this, determine this, and see how best this money can be allocated. So the Senate will actually sit in Nairobi. It will not sit in a county, because we have got 47 senators. They meet together, so they must meet in a central place. And Nairobi will be the meeting place for all the senators.
So understanding the senator, his the big brother of the county, and he's the one who looks out for the county allocation of resources at the national level. So he would be the one at the national level that would say, no, my county is this one, and I think there's been unfair allocation, we need more of this, less of this, and that sort of thing. Okay, understood. You've also talked about the county assembly keeping the county governor in check when he makes certain appointments to that. And based on that, there's a lot of government officials who are now saying, are we going to lose our jobs with the coming in of the governor, the appointments that he will make? Will he say, no, let's remove person X and I will put in person Y? Let's talk about that.
The law and indeed the constitution is very clear. At the county level, each county will establish a county public service board, which is the equivalent, loosely speaking, of the Public Service Commission.
Okay, all right.
The County Public Service Board is basically responsible for the human resource component of a county. Establishment of offices, abolish offices, hiring of people, discipline of county staff, and so on. That is an independent body that is not under the control of a governor.
Okay.
Which means the governor cannot unilaterally make decisions about appointment, about removal of people. That governor is subject to the constitution, and therefore the fear that the governor will wake up and just remove people from office and so on and so forth surely should not arise. He has to work within the provisions of the constitution and within the law. Article 138 of the County Government Act says that any person working in the public service in a county on the effective date of the constitution will be deemed to have been seconded to the county government if that person or that public officer was performing functions that have been assigned or allocated to the county government.
Okay.
So they automatically become employees of the county government.
Okay.
That is a law, that is a constitution. Now, the point to bear in mind is that, as I said before, these functions are being performed by country individuals. The question you might ask yourself is, where is this governor going to get these new people? It's the same people that are going to work with him.
Okay.
This job will be advertised by the County Public Service Commission, not by the governor.
Okay.
People will apply. They will be interviewed in a normal way. If they are found suitable, they will be absorbed as county employees. It's just a normal process.
The same way when you're applying to the civil service, you go through the PSC.
You go to the PSC. If you impress the PSC in terms of meeting the qualifications and the requirements and so on, they appoint you.
Okay.
Yes.
Just understanding now who's going to be absorbed by the county government, who remains, you know, a national sort of civil service employee, if we can say that. Would it be fair to assume that everybody who worked in a county council, a city council, a municipal council is now under the county government, and all those who worked, say, in the Ministry of Lands, if you worked in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, that you are now not in the county but the national? Because I think that's perhaps what the people of Nairobi City Council are saying. So are we, you know, where do we fall?
The answer to that lies in understanding the fourth schedule. The fourth schedule allocates functions to the national government and to the county government. So the answer then is that if the functions you are performing, say before the elections, are functions that fall within the national government, then you are a national government employee. If the functions you are performing fall under the county government, then you will be a county government employee. So that if the functions that were performed by the county council, Nairobi City Council, Kisumu municipality, were functions that have constitutionally been allocated to the county government, then those employees who are performing those functions become employees of the county government. So
there's no need to worry.
There will be a few cases, for example, if you just talk about agriculture. Obviously, in the previous system, agriculture was a function of the national, of the central government, and not of county, or not of local authorities. But now, in the constitution, the agricultural function has been divided into two components. There is the policy, agricultural policy, and the actual implementation of that policy. Policy making in agriculture is a function of the national government, but the implementation of agricultural policy is a function of the county government. So the decision will be made on who are people in charge of policy making. Then they become employees of the national government. Those that are in charge of actual implementation become employees of the national government.
Okay, understood. So what people have been doing, they carry on doing their duties. It'll just depend on where they will now fall under.
Given the function.
Yes, and if there are new roles to be done, that'll be done through the County Public Service Commission. All right, understood.
Yes.
All right, that is made very clear. So no need for anybody to worry about, oh, you know, will we be absorbed or people will be laid off. That is important. Keep your questions coming in. Professor Wanyande is with us. Don't you worry about how simple your questions may sound. It is important that we get a full understanding of this process so that we can engage with it better. So keep your tweets coming in at KTN Kenya, at Yvonne Okwara, and also 8040 is our SMS line. So keep your questions coming in. I can see many of those tweets, and we will be showing them live on air, and of course sharing as many of them as we can with Professor Wanyande, who's with us this morning. Let's talk about now the full implementation process. At what point will we say we have now fully devolved power to the counties?
Again, these things were thought out very carefully by those who drafted or who prepared the Constitution, and they said very clearly that the implementation of the Constitution should take about 5 years from the date of its promulgation. And so that the short answer to that is that 5 years after the promulgation, it's expected that the Constitution will have been fully implemented. That means that all the laws required to give effect to this Constitution should be in place by the 5th year of the promulgation. That also means that all the functions that are required to be transferred from the national government to the county government will have been transferred to the county government, and that should actually, in a sense, complete the process of making this transition to a devolved system of government. There could, of course, be issues here and there, and that will be determined, you know, on a need basis.
Give or take.
But it's a 5 year, yes.
Okay, all right. There's a question here from Collins Nyangoya on Twitter, who says, what are the strategies to ensure that resources are distributed equally? I know there was that equalization fund that was then done. Please explain how you decide Nairobi County gets this amount, Kisumu gets this, and then the equalization process of that.
Well, the basic principle in the Constitution with regard to sharing of revenue is that at least 15% of the nationally raised revenue will be distributed to the counties. That is a basic principle in the Constitution. But then the Constitution creates the Commission on Revenue Allocation. And that commission is mandated by the Constitution to work out a formula by which that money will actually be shared, and that it will then determine through that formula the amount or the percentage, actual percentage, because it says at least 15, but it could be, that means it could be 20, it could be 30, it could be 40. So the Commission for Revenue Allocation is mandated by the Constitution to develop a formula that would help determine the actual amount or percentage to be shared between the national government and the county government. And as far as I know, the Commission on Revenue Allocation has already done that. They have already worked out a formula and in fact made recommendations to the 10th Parliament on how much money or what percentage should actually be distributed to the counties. And Parliament has the final say in terms of making a decision that this is the percentage that will be distributed. So really the Commission on Revenue Allocation has, in fulfillment of its mandate, made that determination. Secondly, there is a provision in the Constitution about the equalization fund. The equalization fund is a fund that is intended to be distributed to those counties that will have been determined as being marginalized counties, marginalized in terms of our historical development, and that that equalization fund will be used on very specific projects within those marginalized counties. They include water, they include electricity, and I believe they include health services. It's all listed out, so that when they get this money, they use it on those very specific projects, and the idea is that it should help those counties actually become a little better than they were compared to the other counties in those particular respects.
Okay, so some form of affirmative action to bring everybody...
To bring everybody more or less on equal footing with regard to development issues, and take into account very specific things, water, roads, electricity, and so on.
Okay. When we talk about now the roles of the county commissioners, who we know are appointed by the president, would like to get an understanding of the role of the county commissioner vis-a-vis the governor, vis-a-vis the senator. Where does the county commissioner fit in the devolved system of government, and what are his or her roles?
A devolved system of government, strictly speaking, has two levels in our context: the national level government and the county level government. So when we talk about the devolved system, we talk about those two levels of government, right? Now, the other thing to say in response to that question is that all the functions, whether they are performed by the county government or the national government, are going to be performed in counties, because our country has now been divided into 47 counties, including Nairobi. So when people are talking about national government functions and national government employees, they must remember that these functions will be performed in a county.
Yes.
All right?
Right.
So the national government will look at its functions at the county level, and maybe decide that we need, as a national government, somebody to coordinate the functions of the national government at a county level. I think that is where the role of the county commissioner comes in, to coordinate national government functions
at the county level. Okay.
Right? That county commissioner will not perform the functions that have been assigned to the county government, which are under the county governor and his team. So that is how the county commissioner comes in. So he's not going to supervise, as it were, the functions of the governor or the functions of a county government. Because Article 6 of the Constitution makes it very clear that the two levels of government, the national and the county, are distinct. They're very distinct. And that is why they're given distinct functions. But they're also required by Article 6 to work in consultation and in cooperation, each respecting the mandate of the other. I think that is the context in which we need to understand the relationship between a county commissioner, who is a national government employee, and a governor, who is a county government employee, as it were. The CEO of the county.
Right, okay.
And both of them, that is the county commissioner and the governor, are members of the executive arm of government, not the legislative arm of government.
Right. They don't make laws. Understood that. And I hope Collins Nyangoya, that answers your question. Was it Collins? No, it was actually Gideon Kipkore who asked what's the relationship between national government and the county government. And I think we are getting to understand that this is Devolution 101. Class is in session. We're with Professor Wanyande, and we're talking about the county governments. We're talking about the devolution system. Any questions, anything that you've wanted to know, wanted to ask, today we're answering that. We've already established the fact that if you are a civil servant or been working for the county governments, do not fear. You will just be moved to the department in which you serve best. If you've been doing functions of the county government, that is where you will be absorbed. There is no fear of people losing their jobs or someone coming in and doing that. And we've understood the role of the county assembly as well as that of the county commissioner. Let's talk about provincial administration. Key many people were born into provincial administration. It is really the form that all of us are familiar with. We know our PC, we know our DO, and I was just telling you this earlier, we know when we turn 18 we go to the DO's office, that's where we get our ID, that sort of thing. Give us the role now of provincial administration in this new system of government.
Again, we go back to the Constitution, and Section 17 of the 6th schedule to the Constitution states that the current system of provincial administration as we know it today will be restructured by the national government, in a period of 5 years from the effective date of this Constitution. Will be restructured to accord with and respect the system, the devolved system of government. So it will be restructured because now they have to take into account the new system. We, for example, no longer have provinces. So part of that structuring will take that into account and restructure that system accordingly. And again, in restructuring the provincial administration, I think the question that should be foremost in the minds of the national government when it is doing the restructuring is to ask what roles were performed by the officers of the provincial administration right from the assistant chief. What were the roles they were performing? Identify those roles and then ask the question, will these roles continue to be necessary under the devolved system of government? Right? The answer is probably yes. Those roles will probably continue. So then the third question is, where in Schedule 4 do these roles fall? Do they fall under the national government or do they fall under the county government? Once that is settled, then the question of where the officers, the current officers of provincial move in, whether the national or county government becomes almost settled. So that if the function they were performing fall under the county government, then they become employees of the county government. If those functions they were performing fall under the national government, then they fall under the national government. That would basically settle the issue. Yeah. All
right. So no fear of them losing their jobs?
I really don't see any reason for any fears at all.
Okay, all right, okay.
If you determine that assistant chief performs a very important role, if that is the conclusion, then that role will continue to be performed.
Okay. He'll probably have a different title.
He may have a different title, but
the work is the
work
same.
will be done.
Okay.
If that work, remains.
Okay. Okay. All right. Talking about that, let's move into the fact that we now have different counties. All of them have a CEO. There's the fear amongst very many people of balkanization, especially along ethnic lines. Counties, very much like provinces, are sort of regions where certain ethnic communities live, the Rift Valley, Western Kenya, Central, and now the counties are done pretty much on the same boundaries, or the same margins, if you like. There's a great fear amongst Kenyans that we will now just become balkanized, and there's that competition in Nairobi County versus Mombasa County. Let's talk about how we keep Kenya united, even though we now have counties and each of them with their own CEO running their business.
Yes, that is something that people have been talking about. But look at the principles of devolution in chapter 11, the principles of devolution, or the devolved system of government. Among the key principles of devolution, that is why the country opted for a devolved system, was basically to try and unite the people of Kenya while recognizing their diversity, and to accept that we are a diverse nation, culturally, racially, in terms of our ethnic composition, in terms of our religious composition, gender, and so on. Now this has got to be recognized, and then find a way of promoting national unity while recognizing this diversity. That's a very clear principle of the devolved system of government. Then when you look at the manner in which resources are going to be distributed, again it talks about the need for fairness, the need for equity, and so on. When you come to the question of elections, which is dealt with in, I think it's chapters 7 or 8 of the Constitution, again it is emphasized that at no time should minorities, say for example even in a county, be marginalized. A way must be found to ensure that they participate in the electoral process and get positions. When you talk about gender, there is the gender rule that no elective position under this system of government should have more than 2/3 of the same gender. That was not there in the past. So in the past, for example, you would have a county assembly that is just, or parliament that is just men. It was possible. But now they're saying even at the county assembly level, Article 177 of the Constitution, if for any reason a county elects only men, or women for that matter, to the county assembly, Article 77 will say you must then nominate a number of women to meet the 2/3 gender rule. So that this Constitution is actually addressing those issues of marginalization, issues of inequality, and I think if we implement it, that's why it's very important to implement this Constitution, then those issues, those things that have divided us will actually be sorted out. But you know, it's a process. I think Kenyans must recognize that it's a process, and it's our responsibility as Kenyans to actually contribute to the implementation of this Constitution so that the gains that are intended by this Constitution are actually realized.
Okay, so no fear perhaps of one county just going rogue and saying, you know, this is what we do, and perhaps also to just add on to that, I am aware that counties are mandated to conduct business in English, Swahili or sign language as the case may be. So we won't have a case of a county in a particular region conducting all their business in their native language.
No.
Yeah. So that's one way of perhaps, you know, just making it national.
Make it national.
Okay.
And the Constitution is very clear. It says it will be conducted in English, in Kiswahili, or in sign language. And a county that fails to do that is violating the Constitution, and any member of the public can actually take that county to court. Okay, yes.
All right, okay. Let's get into some more questions now that we are receiving from our viewers this morning, Professor. Gitonga in Mary says, he talks about, in case a county runs bankrupt, who will bail it out, and seeing as the money that comes from the national government, the central government, is limited?
One hopes that no county will run bankrupt. Chapter 12 of the Constitution on Public Finance is very clear that public resources, both at the national and the county level, must be managed in a prudent manner. It must be done in such a way that the resources are used for purposes for which they are used, they are meant. Governors or any public employees in a county for that matter is subject to the Constitution and the laws that have been passed. So they must use those resources in a manner that does not lead to the bankruptcy. In other words, there are provisions in the Constitution that actually make it very difficult for somebody to misuse public funds. Of course, if you misuse public funds, then you will be taken to court, so that you are accountable to the people of Kenya for that. So really, there are provisions in the Constitution that would guard against misuse of public funds, and if somebody, at whatever level, misuses public funds, he will be subject to the laws of this country. So
and really, we've also talked about the checks and balances, that he has the county assembly, yes, that monitors the work that he does. There's also the Senate at the national level. Okay, all right. Here's an interesting question, Professor, from Stephen Baliacho. Says, why divide the nation into 47 counties when we already had 8 provinces? And like you mentioned, a lot of the functions were already being done. We've just chosen to do it a different way, go the county's way and abolish the provinces. Why that? Would we not just have done everything we're talking about now in the 8 provinces?
Well, that has to do with several things. One is that, you know, we have had a very centralized state structure since about 64-65. A very centralized state structure, in which all major decisions, whether they are political, economic, were made at the center in Nairobi. And that those decisions then were implemented at the provincial level or at the district level and so on. provinces were merely centers of administrative action. But the officers at the provinces, at the districts, were actually answerable to the center in Nairobi. They had no powers really to make law that would govern the provinces or the districts for that matter, right? But now what Kenyans said was that they wanted a system that would enable them at the level where they live to control their resources, to make decisions about how they'll be governed, to hold their leaders who are close to them accountable. That was not possible with the old system, the centralized system. And that is what informed the decision by the framers of the Constitution to create the counties. The point to make is that devolution is a constitutional process. You actually devolve and create county governments through a constitution. What we had before were not devolved units. The provinces were not devolved units. They were simply units of administration where, as I said before, decisions are made at the center. Now,
and then they just implement.
They implemented. Now, the people in a county will actually, through public participation as required by the Constitution, get involved in making decisions about what is their development priority. What is it that they want in a county? Now, I think this is a good system because it allows the citizens to control their development, to control their leaders, to hold them accountable. That was very difficult under the old system. And the objects of devolution states this very clearly. It is to create opportunities for citizens to control their development, to control their future, to control their destiny. And I think that is something that I think every citizen
And 47 is obviously for a more smaller, manageable area as opposed to a larger province that we had. Okay. So, Stephen, I hope that answers your question. And sometimes you will tell with the questions, even though, you know, as Kenyans we say we participated in the making of the new constitution, there's still some understanding that is required of that process. And of course, in speaking with the elected officials, the appointed officials that you did last week, a lot of civic education is required for Kenyans to understand this process. What would be your message to not just Kenyans but civil society, because obviously the CIC is in charge of making sure that it's implemented to the letter, and there's so many other organizations. A lot of civic education is required, is that not so?
A lot of civic education is required. With regard to the devolved system and how the counties will work, the responsibility actually for civic education is being given to the Transition Authority, although CIC has also got the statutory mandate to actually, as it were, review the civic education material actually prepared by any organization in the country to ensure that the content of that civic education
is in line with
the Constitution and would further the implementation of the Constitution.
Of course,
But I agree with you that there is need for very massive civic education. This is something we also found out when we went to the counties last week. There is definitely a need for that, and we're going to urge the Transition Authority and any other body that seeks to do civic education to actually go ahead and do it, bearing in mind that the content must be such that it is in line with the spirit and the and letter of the Constitution. So there is going to be massive civic education, there's no doubt about that. And it should be a continuous process actually. It's not a one-day event where you go and talk to a group of people and say that is it. And it should target both the citizens of this country, but as well as the county officials, the national government officials, so that everybody is really has a common understanding of the issues of implementation of the Constitution, the possible benefits, what the role of each person, because even the citizens have a very important role to play in the implementation. You know, they're the watchdogs really. This Constitution is theirs, so they need to actively participate, and there are channels through which they can participate.
Okay, went right into my next question about the roles, because I like to ask that a lot on the show, the roles of ordinary citizens, persons who voted or didn't, but will now be subject to this form, this new form of government. And it's just talking about understanding the process to be able to hold their leaders to account. You've mentioned some of the stakeholders in the devolution process. Let's just understand who the CIC is working with to make sure that devolution is done properly in this country. Who are the organizations, the institutions that are involved in the devolution process?
Many institutions. To start with, let's start with the newly elected officials at the county level, both the county assembly representatives as well as the governors and the senators. Very key stakeholders in the implementation of the devolved system, because if a governor does not understand his role and does not carry out that role constitutionally and efficiently, then it will cause problems for the devolved system. Similarly, if the county assembly reps do not understand the constitution and their role and carry it out efficiently, then there is going to be a problem with the devolution. So they are very key. But within every county are citizens who are required to get services from these elected officials, from these appointed officials. They too are a key stakeholder and must therefore demand services from the citizens. And there are structures that have been created. For example, if you look at the Cities and Urban Areas Act 2012, it provides for the establishment of citizen forums. Forums through which citizens come together and actually demand or question what is being done by their leaders, at that level. And through that they are able to influence major decisions that affect them. Right. But beyond that, we of course have the national government, because the national government must cooperate and must consult the county governments. So the national government officials have that responsibility also, a major stakeholder in the process. I've mentioned the Transition Authority, which is mandated by an act of parliament to facilitate and coordinate activities relating to the devolved system of government. They too must do their bit, and within the Intergovernmental Relations Act, there are a number of structures that have been created. One of them is, of course, the Council of Governors. All the governors will have a forum through which they meet to discuss issues that affect all the counties. Then there will be the national a summit that will be chaired by the president and will consist of all the governors, so that forum will give them an opportunity to discuss issues affecting the relation between the national government and the county government, and try and sort it out. So what we are going to urge is that now that we have had elections, these structures that have been created within or created by the Intergovernmental Relations Act should now be activated, so that they begin to perform their role that would help a smooth working relation between the county and the national government. Indeed,
and that's very important to talk about, and very important to mention that they will. Even as we talk about the amount of money that the counties will be receiving, courtesy of the County Revenue Allocation Commission, and of course the senators who are up there deciding how much money goes to the counties. This is not the only source of revenue for the counties. Just elaborate on that. Counties won't just be sitting wherever they are and waiting for the national allocation and saying, okay, here comes our 20% from the government. They also do make their own money. Is that right?
Yes. It's very clear that there are two sources of revenue that have been spelled out in the Constitution through which counties can raise revenue. These are property tax and entertainment tax. So every county is mandated by the Constitution to raise revenue through those sources: property tax, entertainment tax. But there is also a provision in the Constitution that they will be allowed to raise tax through any other means allowed by legislation. In other words, legislation can be passed to allow them other avenues of raising taxes. So through those they'll be able to get additional revenue. But counties can also actually obtain loans, get loans, but those loans must be guaranteed by the national government. Again, as part of just ensuring that things are
the national government knows what the county government is doing.
And also to protect the citizens of a county, so that a county government does not take loans that it cannot actually repay. So it's not that they're being supervised, but it's just a question of checks and balances to just be cautious to ensure that the citizens get value for whatever money.
So if I understand you right, Professor, there's nothing that stops a governor from, say, Governor of Meru County, from approaching donors and saying, look, we have the Mira business, or this is what we have, and we need transportation for the services, and then getting a foreign investor to come in and invest in that, and there's nothing that stops the county governor from making such a move, is there? No, there is nothing, because Schedule 4 actually allows county government to engage in trade and trade development. So they can trade actually, and that is something that and as I said, they can get loans, they can negotiate loans. Except that they must have those guaranteed. So there's nothing stopping them from that. Okay, all right. So going forward, we talked about the process of when we would see final and complete devolution 5 years after we promulgated that. That's 2010. So that's 2015, which is about 2 years from now. And we've said give or take, because this is a process, and there might be, not everything goes 100%. This is all things being equal. What would you see as some of the challenges that we need to surmount to make sure that we meet our deadlines, or even if we extend that, but that the devolution process is done effectively?
Well, key to this transition, even when we take the 5-year period, are key to, I'm not saying they're the exclusive ones, is the development and enactment of the relevant legislation that would give effect to the various provisions of the Constitution. So if we can ensure that the required legislation is actually in place, then we will be making a lot of progress. So in other words, I'm answering your question in a positive manner. Yes. But if you want to look at the challenge, is that if we do not ensure that the laws are passed, then that will be a major challenge of ensuring this transition. The other very important component of this transition is the transfer of functions to the county governments. You see, the law says that the functions that have been allocated to county governments in Schedule 4 should be transferred in phases. The first phase has already been done on the 4th of March, when the Transition Authority gazetted the functions that have been transferred immediately. Now the rest of the functions should now be transferred in phases, and that requires that the county governments are ready to take up these additional functions, and there's a criteria that they must fulfill in order to take up these additional functions in the next 3 years or so. So the challenge then is for county governments to work extremely hard to meet the criteria that has been established for purposes of making them ready to take over these functions. So if a county does not take that into account, then it will delay the transfer of these functions and therefore delay the process of transition. My hope is that every county will work as hard as possible to make sure that they get these functions as early as possible, because I think the citizens expect the counties to perform, to provide those services, and a county would be wise if it actually prepared itself to take over these functions. So if they don't do that, that would be a major challenge. The other challenges, if there is some resistance to devolution, but I think that can be dealt with because the Constitution is very clear. So then of course the efficient performance of these governments, once the function has been performed, is an important requirement. If they don't perform well, then that will be a major challenge to then they lose the public trust and everything. Yes, they lose legitimacy. That we've talked about. But even as you mentioned, resistance to devolution, I do think with the new, with the election that we had on March 4th, it would be a little difficult to see lack of political will. We have already voted in county governors, senators, county women's reps. We've constituted the county assembly and that sort of thing in terms of now getting that. So perhaps, fingers crossed, but the political will aspect of it will be a little Yeah, I think we are on the right track. Yeah? I think really the mood in the country is for devolution.
Yes.
And it will be very difficult really for, to resist it successfully.
Yes.
And I think the citizens have demanded this. They want devolution, they want services provided, and the constitution is very clear. If you operate an effective devolved system, then the services will be provided to the citizens, and when citizens are satisfied, they will protect the system, and therefore ensure that any resistance is not successful. So I think we're on the right track.
All right. Just your final message to our viewers who are watching today. And of course, I know the citizens being the watchdogs, like you mentioned, sometimes perhaps we get ahead of ourselves and we see certain things not quite happening right with the transition process, and we say, you see now there's a conspiracy here and there. I'll give you a case in point, Professor, where the Nairobi County Governor should sit. Is it at the City Hall, or was it at the former Prime Minister's office? But there was the Vice President, the Deputy President, and all of that. And then we started to say there's something wrong. The Transition Authority does not seem to be consulting the central government on certain issues. And you know what happens? We get into this conspiracy mode theories. Just your message, yes, we should be watchdogs, but to also understand that this is new for all of us, and of course there will be some hitches, but that does not necessarily mean that fine, now devolution is, in crisis.
No, you're absolutely right. At the initial stage of this major transformation, if you like, there are bound to be hitches here and there, and it all depends on how we manage those hitches. And I think again we are on the right track. Once you identify a problem, the important thing is to find a solution to it. And all these hitches that we have been hearing about, actually solutions are being found to them. Because I think even the governors are eager to sit down and settle down and start their work.
Yes.
I don't think they're going to spend a whole day talking about where to sit, which office and so on.
Yes.
I think those will be sorted out, and they're already being sorted out. Again, we must also recognize that these are very transitional things, like where the governor will sit. It's a transitional thing. Once the governors are in place, the governments are working, they will make decisions and say, look, we want to move to this or this place, we want to buy land here and build if they have the resources.
Yes.
And so it's a transitional thing, so people should not get too worried. What is important is for us, I think as Kenyans, to support the devolved system, to support the constitution, be effective watchdogs, be vigilant, and ensure that it is actually implemented.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Professor, for your time this morning and for breaking down devolution. I think we are slowly coming to a better understanding of the process and what is expected of us, so that we can keep the leaders that we have elected into these positions accountable for that. There's this great comment that's coming in saying, from the questions that we are asking, it is evidence that we voted for a Katiba we barely understand. And I'm not here to admonish anyone who does not understand the Katiba. It's a huge document. It's a legal document. It is okay that we don't understand it, but what are we doing about it? Are we trying to understand it better? Do you have that copy of that Katiba with you? That would be important. Listen, even for legal minds like Professor Wanyande, he never walks without it. And it is here for his reference. Perhaps we should do the same. If a legal person can do that, then perhaps we should think about doing the same. It is all right that we don't know, as long as we're doing something about it. And this show was just the start of that civic education exercise. Like Professor said, it is up to very many organizations to make sure that we understand this process. This is the part that we are playing, having him here, answering all your questions. And it won't end here. This won't be the first time we will have a commissioner from the CIC to just talk about the various areas of the implementation of the Constitution that we have. So if you're not very well knowledgeable, nothing to be ashamed about, but we'll definitely do something to learn more about the process. I hope we've been able to help you understand that devolution process a little bit better. Professor Wanyande was my guest from the CIC. Coming up next, we're talking about your money. We're talking about that informal chama. You guys meet once a week, once a month. How do you turn that into a powerful investment opportunity, venture, initiative? All of that. Washeke Ndwati Omanga joins us next. We take a short break first. We'll be right back. Stay with us.